And for more on the latest from Congress, we turn now to Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman of Indiana. He's a member of the House Financial Services Committee as well as the Budget Committee and is joining us now on Bloomberg TV and radio. Congressman, welcome back to Balance of Power. You, of course, are now at home in your district for recess. What response are you getting from constituents about the big, beautiful bill? Is it more excitement or concern?
No, a lot of excitement. I come from Northeast Indiana. Fort Wayne is the center of my district. A lot of manufacturing, a lot of agriculture, logistics, a lot of small businesses. And so I hear from a lot of constituents that they're anxious to now have the tax rates, in law. They're going to stay in place. Of course, no tax on overtime, no tax on tips is also very beneficial to a lot of businesses in my district. They're excited about the trade policy that they're hearing about from President Trump as he's overseas right now. There's several factors that are going to really create a strong economy, and two of them have been addressed already. That's the taxes, and then also trade and tariffs, which President Trump has been a leader on. And that last piece is the interest rates. And I think as the first two continue to come into focus for people to plan on productivity moving forward, that's going to give them a lot of certainty, but it's still that interest rate that still is holding some of the economy back, especially when it comes to real estate and home ownership.
We'll be talking about that a lot more this week when the Federal Reserve meets, of course, Congressman. We try to talk about policy when you join us here, its connection to the markets, the way Washington impacts Wall Street. But there's been a big distraction recently called Jeffrey Epstein, and we keep bumping into it just like you are. Bring us outside of the Beltway. Are people bringing this up to you at home?
I mean, a little bit. I do hear from certain constituents that, I think what is the issue here, Joe, is that people want to know that they can trust their government. And I agree with that. And so transparency is really important here. Of course, the JFK files were released, and also Martin Luther King Jr. files were released. And Epstein is one of those. Of course, it's obviously more recent. And I think that's what people just want to know, that the government's being honest. And so while it may have taken a little more time than what we expected, I think there's certain reasons that the Trump administration is being very careful with it. And I think that as I trust them to release the information as it's appropriate. But, most people are saying, hey, just let us have it. We can decide what's, the right conclusion, for each individual. But I know that they are also more interested in, really the security and safety of the country and also the economy, which is always the most important factor at the end of the day.
Well, so on the economy, I want to return to your point on interest rates, Congressman, as I noticed you posted on X a few days ago that you agree with the criticism from the FHFA director, Bill Pulte, that he has aimed toward the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell. You say it's spot on and that, quote, Powell's poor decisions are standing in the way of a booming Trump economy and American prosperity. But does that kind of pressure from Pulte, from you, from others in the administration actually risk undermining the legitimacy and the independent credibility of the Federal Reserve, which could have detrimental economic impacts all on its own?
No, I don't think so at all. In fact, I've had breakfast with other committee members on financial services with Jerome Powell. He's a very nice man. We always have a lot of good conversations. They obviously have their metrics and their statistics and research that they've done on what's going on within the economy and how they come to their objectives of course, keeping inflation low and keeping unemployment rates low as well. But I think it's just important for us as members of Congress to talk about what we hear in the district. When you talk to homeowners and you talk to realtors and you talk to small businesses, that's a big concern right now, is just the fact that home real estate sales are just very flat. There's not much movement. Home prices are high, but it's just simply because there aren't that many buyers. And especially if you're in one of the 3% or even lower, in some cases, interest rates with your home mortgage, it's pretty tough to go out and buy a home that's a higher price and a higher interest rate, considering the circumstances. Some people are doing it because they have to, But I think you would see a lot more velocity and a lot more activity if those interest rates were a tad lower. And I think most of us feel that if there wouldn't have been an interest rate an interest rate reduction right before the election this last time, it wouldn't have felt political. But it almost feels a little bit political right now.
Well, that's, what the concern is, that if there's an interest rate cut now or in September, the market's going to ask, hey, was this a gift to Donald Trump? Was the Fed chair under pressure? But I want to ask you, Congressman, about what happens when you come home. You're going to be spending time, of course, with friends, family, and constituents, and you're not going to have a lot of time to take care of budget matters when you return. There are a lot of Democrats who are very sore about the rescissions package that passed and the promise of another one. And many of them have told us that they're not game to deal with Republicans about writing a new budget because they can't trust you. Does that ensure a government shutdown?
Well, it sure seems like the Democrats do want to see a shutdown. There was a lot of talk about Chuck Schumer not agreeing to the 60-vote cloture vote on the last CR. And he got a lot of pressure from the left wing of the Democrat Party. And I think that they're probably boxed in a bit and that they're not interested in working together with Republicans. There's a lot of bills right now, whether it's the MAHA bills, whether it's cryptocurrency, some international bills that we had in financial services dealing with Syria and the sanctions that are on Syria. Working together is really, positive for everybody. But, I think that unfortunately, some Democrats just don't want to see Trump have a victory. Look at the polling. I think that, one thing that we know about politicians is that a lot of them look at polling and they should realize that they're underwater more than they're normally used to. And I think that there's a lot of people here in America that are starting to realize how much debt that the American taxpayer is holding through the federal government. $37 trillion is just not sustainable. $1 trillion in debt service is irresponsible. And so a CR, I think, some people have to, we don't always like them, but in this case, if we could get a year-long CR, that might be the best we can get. A shutdown tends to usually not help the party that it's blamed for.
Well, as you talk about the best that Congress might be able to get, we heard the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen talking today about the best deal that Europe could get, as they have at least a handshake agreement with the U.S. now for a 15% tariff rate on European exports, just one of a number of deals that we're tracking, including, of course, not necessarily comprehensive trade deals, but agreements with other countries like Australia, which is going to be purchasing more American beef, which I know is an issue that you care about deeply. Is all of this evidence that the threat of tariffs is actually working, and is the potential economic cost of that okay as a result?
Well, not only do we have the greatest military in the world, we also have the greatest economy in the world. And President Trump knows that. And that's why he's utilizing our economy for pressure on countries like Russia, also the European Union. I know France is a little miffed about it and feeling like they got pressured into this trade deal. But the fact is that, the United States and our economy, we're big consumers, but we're also large producers. And President Trump is finally looking out for our productivity in this country. In my district in particular here in Northeast Indiana, I can take you to schools where, their student enrollment used to be 6,000 students back in the 80s, and now it's 3,000 students. And that's just simply because manufacturing jobs went either to Mexico or went overseas, where it was easier to do business. And now President Trump is really leveling the playing field. And I think that I know we're starting to see here in Northeast Indiana, more orders coming in manufacturing. And so those are all positives. The European Union just needs to realize a good business partnership and a relationship is going to be good for them in the long run. And we can all be winners here. But the United States has had this steady decline over time. And President Trump's, agreeing with the American people that enough's enough and we've got to level the playing field. And that's what's happening.
Marlin Stutzman, not only a Republican congressman, but co-owner of Stutzman Farms. Are you a ribeye guy or do you go with the strip?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. I sure like a good ribeye, and we've started raising some Wagyu beef, and that's a tough one to beat.
Let's talk about that next time. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us, as always, on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.